There's a postcard version of the Royal Guard. Red tunic, black bearskin, eyes forward, jaw locked, standing so still that tourists convince themselves he's decoration. A prop bolted to the pavement outside Buckingham Palace, something between a statue and a costume rental. Actually, they take the photo. Tag it. I mean, move on. What they don't know, what they can't know from the postcard, is what's happening behind those eyes. In my opinion, the calculation, the restraint, the cold, unsurgical awareness of every body within striking distance. I know because I was the one taking notes. 14 months embedded with the King's Guard ceremonial detail as part of an internal ministry review. 14 months watching tourists flick bottle caps, shout slurs, press toddler faces into bearskins for a laugh. 14 months watching those men hold the line. And then, one Tuesday in October, gray sky, light drizzle, the smell of horse manure drifting in from the Royal Mews. A kid in a North Face jacket decided the line didn't apply to him. He was wrong. What happened in the next 4 minutes changed how I understood discipline, legacy, and the particular species of courage it takes to be unmoved when the world is actively trying to make you flinch. This isn't the postcard version. His name was Guard Corporal James Whitmore, and the first thing I ever wrote about him in my log was, "Doesn't blink at normal intervals." That sounds clinical. It wasn't a clinical observation. It was unsettling in the way that very still water is unsettling. Not because something is wrong, but because you can't shake the feeling that something is waiting beneath the surface. And I'd been stationed. Stationed is probably too strong a word for a man with a clipboard and a lanyard. At the Buckingham Palace ceremonial entrance since the first week of September. My job, technically, was observation and documentation for the ministry's internal review of public-facing security protocols. My job, actually, was to stand near enough to take notes without getting in the way, which meant I spent a great deal of time developing opinions about tourists. October the 14th was a Tuesday. Tuesdays at the Palace Gate have a particular texture, lighter foot traffic than weekends, the tour groups thinner, the professional photographers replaced by civilians with iPhones they hold horizontally. The drizzle that morning had thinned the crowd further. Maybe 40 people clustered along the railings, a few of them actually looking at the building, most of them looking at Whitmore. He stood sentry at the left post. Regulation posture. Spine like a plumb line, bearskin centered, the SA-80 at his shoulder catching zero light in the gray morning. He'd been on post 47 minutes. I know because I logged it. And I also logged the arrival of the boy at 9:22. 13, maybe 14. North Face jacket in an aggressively corporate shade of orange. Trainers that cost more than my monthly food budget. Not the particular loose-limbed swagger of a kid who has never once, in his life, been told no, and had that no stick. He came through the tourist cluster the way water finds the lowest ground. Not cutting, exactly. Displacing, assuming without checking that the space would open for him. It did. People, for what it's worth, moved, and they always do, for that particular energy. He stopped 2 meters from Whitmore. Plus, I was, I think, 8 meters back, clipboard balanced on my forearm. I noted the time. I noted, for no reason I can entirely explain, that Whitmore's left hand adjusted almost imperceptibly on the rifle stock, a single finger repositioning, and then went still again. The boy took, actually, out his phone, filmed for maybe 15 seconds, then lowered it. Looked at Whitmore the way you look at a vending machine that hasn't dropped your selection yet. He stepped over the line. There's a physical line. Brass kind of, rail set into the paving. TBH. It isn't subtle. It is flanked by signage in 4 languages. Every human, pretty much, Being standing in that forecourt had been within reading distance of those signs for the past 5 minutes minimum. The boy stepped over it anyway. Plus 1 foot. Testing. You know, Whitmore did not move. The boy's friends, 2 of them, same jacket in different colors, phones already raised, made a sound. Encouragement dressed up as a dare. The boy stepped fully over. Plus, he was inside the restricted perimeter now, close enough to reach out, maybe 1.5 meters from Whitmore's chest. To be fair, he said something. I was too far to catch the words, but I caught the shape of them, the upward lilt. At the honestly end, the smirk mid-sentence, the beat of silence he left after, waiting for a reaction he could film. Whitmore's eyes did not move, which, that is the thing they don't tell you in the postcard version. The eyes don't go blank. That's a myth. A lazy shorthand. What actually happens is the opposite, and the eyes sharpen. Everything behind them sharpens. What looks like absence to a tourist is from 8 meters away with a clipboard and a reason to be watching carefully. Something closer to a fire in a sealed room. Contained. Complete. I think. Burning without oxygen. The boy reached up. Not quickly. Slowly. With the specific theatrical slowness of someone performing for an audience. He extended 2 fingers toward the bearskin on Whitmore's head. Not touching. Not yet. A centimeter from the fur. Whitmore moved. It wasn't dramatic. Plus, that's what hit me first, after. How undramatic it was. No shout. No lunge. He didn't unshoulder the rifle. He turned his head. Just his head. 90 degrees. Precise, and he looked at the boy. I have interviewed 12 members of the King's Guard in the course of this review. 7 of them have described, in various registers, wry, reluctant, proud, a specific technique they call the consideration. It isn't taught formally. It, for what it's worth, is passed laterally, guard to guard, senior to junior, in the way that institutional knowledge always moves when the institution doesn't want to admit it exists. It is the act of letting someone understand, without a word, without a gesture, that you have fully considered what you are capable of doing to them and elected, provisionally, not to. In my opinion, the boy's hand dropped. Not slowly. It dropped the way things drop when the muscles forget what they were doing. His phone arm lowered a half-second later. His friends went quiet. Whitmore held the look for 3 seconds, I counted, and then turned his head back. Forward. Spine. Plumb line. Which eyes not blinking at normal intervals. The boy took a step back, then another. He didn't run. Running would have been an admission. Fine, and kids like that don't make admissions. But he drifted backward with the studied casualness of someone trying to make a retreat look like a choice. His friends absorbed, actually, him back into their cluster. Phones went down. Honestly, there were no laughs. At 9:26, they left. I stood there for a moment with my clipboard, pen hovering above the log where I'd written, 9:22. Subject approaches post. I looked, at what I'd written. I looked at Whitmore, who hadn't moved, son whose finger had returned to the exact position on the rifle stock, whose jaw hadn't shifted. I wrote, 9:26, subject departs. Then I stood there in the drizzle, trying to figure out what word you use, for what I'd just watched. It wasn't intimidation. Intimidation implies threat, and there'd been no threat. It wasn't performance. Performance implies audience, and Whitmore hadn't seemed to notice anyone was watching. It was something older than both of those things, and I clicked my pen 3 times. A habit I have, apparently, when I don't know what to write. On the pavement, behind the brass rail, a pigeon landed where the boy had been standing and found nothing worth having. It left, too. I found Whitmore 2 hours later in the guardroom, sitting with his bearskin on the table in front of him, like a patient he was waiting to receive bad news about. He was eating a sausage roll, which not ceremonially, not with any, in my opinion, due awareness that a man with a ministry clipboard had just let himself in. He bit, plus chewed, looked at the middle distance. The sausage roll was from a Greg's bag that had been folded down with the particular care of someone trying to make a Greg's bag last. I introduced myself. He looked at the lanyard. Something behind his eyes did a brief, tired calculation. "Sit down then, honestly," he said, and took another bite. I sat. I noted the room, low ceiling, my strip lighting that hummed in B-flat or close enough to it, a kettle that had left a mineral stain on the counter shaped like Norway, a row of SA-80s racked along the wall with the fastidious organization of men who find order genuinely comforting, not performative. Someone had put a small ceramic hedgehog on the shelf above the rifles. I wrote, "Hedgehog, ceramic." Unexplained. Whitmore finished the sausage roll, folded the bag well with the same care. Set it aside, "Which the review," he said. "You're kind of going to ask me about the review." "Eventually," I said. He looked at me then, properly, the way he hadn't bothered to yet. 34 years old. I'd read his file that morning. 9 years in the King's Guard. Prior, service with the Welsh Guards. One operational tour that the file described in the careful bureaucratic language used when something happened that nobody wants to describe carefully. A commendation that took up 4 lines. To a disciplinary note that took up 2, dated 3 years ago, relating to an incident the file called an inappropriate verbal response to a member of the public. I'd underlined that one. "This morning," I said. "The kid." He looked back at the bearskin. "These hats, I'dn't known this before September, weigh approximately 1.5 pounds and stand 18 inches high. The chin strap alone can, over an 8-hour ceremonial duty shift, leave a mark on the jaw that takes 2 days to fade. The fur is Canadian black bear, ethically sourced now, which the tabloids occasionally agonize over while photographing the same guards wearing them. The guards themselves have opinions about this that they keep inside the sealed room. "He sort of touched it last time," Whitmore said. I looked up from my log. "Boy like that 3 weeks ago. Different one. Same jacket." He tilted his head slightly at the bearskin. "Got 2 fingers into the fur before the PO on duty intervened. I'd spent the rest of the shift picking someone else's fingers out of your headgear mentally." He paused. "Not my best, I think, afternoon. But you didn't react this morning." "No. The turn, the look. That's not a reaction," he said. "That's kind of a communication." I wrote that down. He watched, I guess. Me write it with the expression of a man who suspects being quoted, but can't object to the accuracy. "The rule," he said, "is stillness. You know the rule. You know everyone knows the rule. And stillness is the job. Plus the whole point of the whole thing is that you don't react. Not to weather, not to shouting, not to someone deciding you're an attraction." He pulled the bearskin slightly toward him on the table, a reflex which, and you don't, mostly. You find, I guess, the middle distance, and you go there. It's not a trick. It's a place. You learn where it's. But you're still in your body. He said it flat, without complaint, like a surveyor describing a property defect. Your heart still does things. Your hands still want to do things. The gap between what your body wants and what you do, that's the job. Every second of it. That gap is what you're actually standing there maintaining. The strip light hummed. B-flat. Possibly B-flat minor. I guess 9 years, I said. 9 years. How wide does the gap get? He looked at me, then at the hedgehog on the shelf, which then back. "Depends on the, in my opinion, day," he said. I thought about the boy's hand and a centimeter from the fur. I thought about Whitmore's finger repositioning on the rifle stock 47 minutes into a 2-hour post. I thought, about the disciplinary note in his file, inappropriate verbal response, and the 3 years since, and the way he'd folded that Greg's bag with the focused care of someone who channels things into containers. "The note in your file," I said, 3 years ago. He didn't stiffen, didn't look away. The stillness was different from the post, less martial, more resigned. The stillness of a man who has already had this conversation with himself at length and reached an accommodation with the outcome. "Woman spat on my boot," he said. I pretty much told her what I thought about that. And I was wrong to. He said it with the flatness of something repeated until it became ritual. Basically, words don't serve the uniform. I know that. Do you believe it? He stood, picked up the bearskin, turned it in his hands once, an intimate gesture, almost tender, the way you hold something you've had long enough to know its particular weight. "I believe," he said slowly, "that 9 years is a long time to hold a gap open." He didn't say anything else. He set, the bearskin on his head, adjusted the chin strap with the quick efficiency of a man who has done this act approximately 3,000 times, and straightened up. A transformation was instant and total. The man eating the sausage roll was gone. What was standing in the low-ceilinged guard room with the B-flat strip light and the ceramic hedgehog was something that had been built by increment, year by year, out of held breath and bitten tongue, and a 9-year gap maintained between impulse and action. He nodded at my clipboard. Not dismissive, precise. "Get what you needed." I looked down at my notes. 9:22, subject approaches post. Kind of. 9:26, subject departs. Hedgehog, ceramic. Unexplained. The gap is what you're actually standing there maintaining. "Getting there," I said. He left. The door clicked behind him with the sound of something latched very carefully into place. The kettle stain looked less like Norway from this angle, more sort of like a man standing very still in a doorway. I clicked my pen. 3 days after the guardroom conversation, I was late filing my interim report. So this is relevant only because the reason I was late is that I'd read through my notes 6 times and kept arriving at the same problem. I could describe what I'd observed with complete accuracy and still fail to convey what it actually was. The ministry's review framework had a tick box system, 37 parameters, public interaction compliance, threat escalation protocol, and ceremonial standard maintenance. I'd filled, for what it's worth, all 37 boxes, which I'd filled them with the hollow precision of a man filling in a form about a painting by listing the dimensions of the canvas. I went back. Not officially. The review didn't require it. I went because I'd started thinking about the gap, Whitmore's word, in a way that made it hard to concentrate on other things. The particular shape of it. The 9-year architecture of it. The cost, and the second time I watched him on post. It was a Friday. TBH, heavier crowd. It's a pale winter light doing nothing useful with the gold on the gates. A tour group from what I estimated was South Korea moved past in a coordinated rectangle, their guide's umbrella raised like a maritime signal. A man, basically, in a high-vis jacket, ate a sandwich directly in front of the sentry. Box, with the territorial confidence of someone who has decided public space is his personally. Whitmore stood. Which plumb line? Eyes. The high-vis man looked at him once, plus chewed, looked away. There's a hierarchy of looking that happens at the palace gate, I'd cataloged it over months without realizing that's what I was doing. The sort of children look with open curiosity. The teenagers look with the studied disinterest of people who are very interested. The adults look and then look at their phones, and then look again. The old ones look longest, and their faces do something private that I don't log because it doesn't belong in a ministry report. I was looking at Whitmore's hands. He had told me the hands want to do things. He hadn't elaborated. I watched them now. Right hand on the SA-84 grip, left at his side. And I tried to see what wanting looked like inside perfect stillness. I think I found it. A tension in the left thumb, a barely there curl, like the hand was starting a thought it had learned to never finish. At 11:14, the boy came back, not the orange jacket kid from Tuesday. Plus, a different one, older, maybe 15, my 16, tracksuit, expensive trainers again. I'm developing a theory about expensive trainers and threshold testing behavior that I won't be including in my ministry report. He had a phone already raised. He walked the brass rail like a balance beam, 1 foot on either side. Technically not a violation. Technically a negotiation with the letter of the rule. Smart enough to know the line. Interested enough in the line to make it a performance. Whitmore's eyes tracked him. Not obviously. Plus, a nothing look an iPhone would catch. But the angle of his gaze shifted with the boy's movement by approximately 3 degrees per step, the way a compass needle moves, not dramatically, just correctly. The boy stopped. Did the, look, the specific look, the one that says you can't do anything, can you? You're a costume. I basically have thought about this look more than I expected to. What I've landed on is that it requires a particular kind of failure of imagination, and you have to genuinely be unable to conceive of the person in front of you as a person, as someone who drove to work this morning, ate something, thought about something, carried something. The uniform pretty much has to succeed so completely as a symbol that it erases the man inside it. And for most people, most of the time it does. That's the design, that's the point. The bare skin and the tunic and the plumb-lined spine and the not blinking. It's a system for converting a man into an institution. For the, in my opinion, duration of the post, Whitmore wasn't Whitmore. He was continuity. He was sort of the idea of something being protected and maintained. The boy, to be fair, knew this intuitively and was using it against the man. What he didn't pretty much. No, what the design conceals, necessarily, is that the institution is performed by a person who has been on his feet since before 0600, whose jaw carries a strap mark that will take 2 days to fade, who ate a Greg's sausage roll out of a folded bag 3 days ago, and told me that 9 years is a long time to hold something open. The boy made his move. Not dramatic. He leaned forward over the rail, one hand on it for balance, and held his phone about 8 inches from Whitmore's face. Filming, waiting for something to happen. The crowd around him noticed. A small circle of attention formed. That particular social electricity, where people understand something is being tested. Honestly, Whitmore moved, not the head turn. Something different this time. He spoke, and one word. I was close enough. I'd moved, over the preceding 4 minutes, to within 5 meters. I heard it clearly. I want to be fair, write it in the log. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a procedural instruction. It was the kind of word that belongs to the sealed room. The one word, in the particular tone, that communicates to a teenager with absolute efficiency that he's being seen. Not as a tourist. Not as a disruption. As a specific person making a specific choice that has been evaluated and found wanting. The boy lowered the phone. He looked at Whitmore. Actually looked, maybe for the first time, past the tunic. The bare skin at whoever was standing behind them. and I watched something cross his face that I don't have ministry terminology for. He left without speaking. The circle dissolved. The high-vis man was gone. The tour group was a rectangle disappearing toward the Victoria Memorial. Whitmore was already somewhere else. To be fair, the middle distance. The place he'd learned to find. Left thumb still. Right hand correct on the grip. I stood on the pavement with my clipboard and did not write anything for a full minute. What I was thinking about, what I couldn't stop thinking about, was the commendation in the file. 4 lines. The operational tour with the careful bureaucratic language. The things a man learns to hold. The gap, which 9 years of it, and he was still here, standing between a brass rail and a palace gate in B-flat drizzle, and converting himself daily into a symbol that asked nothing of the people who used it as a mirror. I wrote finally, at the bottom of the page, query for follow-up. Who debriefs the guard? I underlined it. I submitted the report 6 days later. 37 boxes, honestly. All ticked. I left the question out.